about the Amish, you probably picture the past. Horse and buggy, no electricity, a life frozen sometime around 1850. That is not exactly what is happening. The Amish are not people from the past. They're traditional people who choose how they want to live today. And that is a totally different thing, and it changes how we should be looking at them and their homemaking. And one of the clearest places you can see that choice is at work. It's almost embarrassingly simple. Their week has a shape to it. Certain jobs get certain days, not because anyone wrote it into law, but because after generations of trial and error, it just works. And I'm not saying the Amish are perfect. Who is? But I want to dive into their efficient system. Hey, I'm Robin. I'm a retired ER nurse, mom, and a wife, and I help women get their homes and their energy back. Today, we're pulling that weekly shape apart piece by piece, how they actually wash, how they actually bake, how they actually sew, and building you a version at the end that you can start using this week. So let's jump in. Monday, which is laundry day. Wash day, full stop. And the how is worth explaining because it is not even as remotely as simple as tossing a load in, which of course is my entire laundry strategy, and I'm already a laundry hater. So imagine what they have to go through. Many Amish households will use a wringer washer, a non-electric or a gas power machine that agitates the clothes in the tub, and then feed them through two rubber rollers that squeeze the water out, so it's the wringer. And since there's no spin cycle doing that job, they have to compress it through these rollers. Now, of course, there are different methods and models available. Water will get heated on the stove beforehand because there is no hot tap feeding the machine directly. Smaller households or smaller loads like delicates often get washed entirely by hand in a basin with a washboard. The ridged surface is doing the scrubbing that your machine's agitator would otherwise handle. And it's more than a musical instrument, it's a fancy clothing cleaning device. And don't you go thinking that the order to wash doesn't matter, because we want the white and the least heavily soiled items to go in first, while the water is the cleanest. And then we do the dark clothing last. Once they're all spick and span, oh, and speaking of spick and span, they make their own soap. At this point, we'd be more surprised if they didn't, or they buy it from an Amish store. Everything gets hung outside on a line, weather permitting. And this isn't just about avoiding electricity, which they are, but sunlight is a fantastic mild disinfectant and a natural bleaching agent. It breaks down any remaining bacteria. It also brightens the whites without a single chemical added. After everything's dry, they're going to fold and put away. That usually happens the same day, of course, like depending on weather and everything. And they definitely don't want to leave things in the basket to be dealt with eventually. And yes, many households will iron, which might delay putting away by a day. They will use a flat iron heated directly on the stovetop, sometimes which is called a sad iron, or in some communities, a kerosene or a coal heated iron. An iron typically happens right alongside the folding while everything is still hot and the laundry's already out and nothing gets a second trip. Now, beyond laundry, Monday keeps to light daily upkeep. So meals still get made, dishes still get washed, but nothing competes for the wash, for the real attention. And it always makes me wonder, I wonder what kind of meals they're making that day. Quick myth bust before we move on, because this is actually very important for everything that follows. There is no single Amish community. There are dozens of different affiliations spread across multiple states, even a few provinces up here in Canada. And they don't all live identically. Some communities allow for phones for business purposes only. Some will hire drivers for long trips. Some will accept modern medicine without a single thought, including surgery or hospital birth. Choice isn't necessarily rejecting the modern world wholesale. A big part of it is their religion. The choice is actually closer to keeping what serves the community and leaving what erodes it and what helps them to feel safe. An extremely inconvenient principle once you apply it to Instagram. That is actually discernment that they have, and it's not really deprivation. Most of us could use so much more of that. Not less technology out of guilt, but more actual thought about what is earning its place in our everyday life and what we're like truly allowing in. So my air fryer is definitely safe though. So I'm going to walk you through, it's not just the official Amish cleaning chart pulled from some historical document. It's a conglomeration that I've pieced together from former Amish voices describing what their households actually did week after week. This is people who have been in the Amish community and even people who still are. There's no single correct version of this, but a shape shows up again and again across these accounts, and that shape is the interesting part worth stealing. Tuesday, which is baking and food work day, which I would love. I know some people don't, but I do. This is the day the kitchen really produces. So if you're a kid, you want to be nearby to get the goodies, and this is what we in the business call strategic loitering. But the how they produce so much is super interesting. So bread, what is sweeter in life, honestly? Well, the bread gets mixed by hand in a large bowl, kneaded on a floured counter for a solid stretch of time, maybe like 10 to 20 minutes. There is no stand mixer doing the work. A chill just went up my KitchenAid's spine. So the arms are doing exactly what the dough hook would otherwise do for at least 15 minutes, often with huge batches, multiple loads. Many households also would keep a live starter going specifically so baking doesn't start from zero every single week. And I actually do that too. Finally, I can start fitting in. But it gets fed, portioned, and the rest goes into the week's loaves. They feed it, they set it aside, and it's good for the next time. Dough typically rises near the wood stove where the ambient warmth speeds things along. As for the flour, tons of Amish households buy in bulk, 25 to 50 pounds at a time from a local mill rather than from a grocery store. And if you want, because I started doing that and the difference is amazing. You can be like me and do the same. I love organic flour that's grown from nearby. Some actually grow their own wheat though, and they have it milled, though that is less universal than people would assume. Buying in bulk from a trusted mill is far more common. Their oven itself is usually a wood-fired cook stove, and the same stove that they use for cooking their meals, and it has a firebox that has to be tended to and a temperature that's read by feel and experience rather than by a dial, which is where they have great trust. And I think that just sounds so cozy, although I'm probably romanticizing all of this stuff. They're probably like, Some of their households, especially those with slightly more liberal technology allowances, will use a propane-powered oven that functions much closer to what we're used to today, just without the electric ignition. Now, beyond bread, Tuesday also covers pantry replenishment and food prep for the days ahead. Chopping, portioning, anything that saves a future version of yourself a decision later in the week. And since this is the daily maintenance actually gets a mention, here is what it looks like in practice. Every single day of the week, not just Tuesday, the table and the counters get wiped down after every single meal, not left for later. Dishes get washed right away after eating. Every time. No 14-hour soaks for them. Those 2-hour habits alone are doing an enormous amount of structural work. They're the reason the kitchen never becomes the thing that you're dreading at the end of the day. Wednesday, which is sewing, mending, and seasonal things day. So it carries two main identities. We're going to dive into both. So the first is sewing and mending. Now, many Amish women, of course, are sewing the majority of their family's clothing from scratch using a treadle sewing machine, which is foot powered instead of electric powered. And the needle is driven entirely by the rhythm of the foot pumping the pedal. You've probably seen them before. Meanwhile, I pretty much outsource everything to a tailor because I am short and everything needs to be hemmed. They buy their plain fabric typically from bulk stores and dry goods stores, and the patterns for the actual like garments are handed down from family and generations and community instead of buying one every single time. Now, anybody who has little boys or little girls knows mending is a constant ongoing practice and not an occasional task. So knees and elbows often get patched rather than the whole garment being retired because they don't want to be wasteful, which most of us in the non-Amish world end up doing. Now, one of the things I do is I actually will do a little bit of patch sewing, but it has to be pretty basic. They also will let the seams out as their children grow instead of buying another season of the same dress or trousers because kids, they can grow up fast. So they plan in advance. Buttons get reattached the minute they're loose before they get lost in Lake Endor, and socks get darned, which is a technique of weaving new thread across a worn heel or a toe rather than throwing the sock away, which is something nobody does anymore except for the very niche TikTokers, but this was super standard before. The underlying belief here, it's very straightforward. In a household built around making things last, repair is the default action and not the backup when you reach for things when you can't afford new. And it always makes me think of Sesame Street, where there was was his name I want to say Mr. Roper, but that's not right. Luis, he would fix things. And I mean, there used to be repair shops. I don't think anybody gets stuff repaired anymore. Not much anyway. The next part is seasonal work like canning. So when something in the garden is ripe, it is not going to wait for a more convenient day. So if you don't tackle it right away, your beans, your tomatoes, and the cucumber, they're going to go bad. They are ready when they're ready, and delaying even a few days risks losing part of the harvest to spoilage or to over ripening. Garden produce is famously uninterested in your plans. It's not very patient. They have these huge canners that fit dozens of jars where you normally will not see these things unless you live in Amish country, and I live on Vancouver Island, so I am very far from Amish country. Anyway, it's a process. Prepping the produce, filling and processing the jars, then letting them cool, checking that every lid is sealed properly. Canning is very wholesome. It's also microbiology. So placing this on Wednesday makes sense for a specific reason. Wednesday is already the flexible day. It's doing the mending, it's doing the other seasonal things, the one that is built to absorb whatever the week actually demands rather than what the calendar assumed in advance. A day built around mending and catch-up has room in it for canning when the garden calls for it. Although there are days where, like it's ready on a Friday and they're like, well, I guess we're doing it on Friday. Thursday, bedrooms day. So this is not a light day. It is a real linen wash. They're not just swapping them out. They're taking their sheets and their pillowcases, they strip them off the bed, they wash them just like they did on Monday, and it all gets its own dedicated load, because if you're like me, can you relate and you're like, can I combine his sheets with her sheets, or is that too much? I'm over here compressing the load like I'm closing a suitcase, knowing it will delay drying. Why am I like this? Anyway, they wash their sheets separate from the general laundry that already happened on Monday because, as we know, bedding is bulky and it benefits from its own space in the machine and the basin. Once it's washed, it goes back out on the line. Same reasoning as Monday. Sunlight, fresh air, no lingering dampness trapped indoors. It's going to smell amazing. And while the linens are out on the line, the mattresses themselves are aired out. Windows are opened. They let the mattresses breathe for that entire stretch of the day. And this reduces the moisture buildup, the dust mites that thrive in it, which is something that a lot of us have never given any thought to. And beyond the linens, the bedrooms get a good dusting. So the dressers and the windowsills and the headboards swept out, drawers, closets, everything gets straightened and gone through. Not a full reorganization, just sort of making sure everything is in its place again. Once a week, the bedrooms get real dedicated attention instead of losing every single day to whatever is happening in the kitchen. And I think we can all collectively appreciate how great it feels to get into bed with clean sheets at the end of the day. Pure heaven. Friday, which is bathrooms and utility areas. So this is the day the less glamorous rooms of the house finally get pulled apart properly. In the bathroom, cabinets often get emptied out entirely rather than wiped around. Everything comes out, shelves get scrubbed, and only what is actually needed goes back in, which is great because it's double duty as a small decluttering session. Walls near the tub or the sink get wiped down, not just the fixtures themselves. And then the mudroom and the entryway get a deep physical clean. The rooms that know everything about you. No robot vacuum running around here though. Rugs get taken outside. They hang them over the clothesline and then they beat them with a rug beater, which is a paddle-shaped tool that knocks embedded dirt and dust out from the fiber. Can you imagine who invented the rug beater? They were probably annoyed with something their neighbor or their husband did, and then they whacked that rug, and then they were like, wow, this is clean now. I have just invented something amazing. Floors underneath get swept and washed, boot trays, shoe areas get sorted through and tidied. The laundry area gets wiped down too. The wringer washer itself would get cleaned of lint, any kind of residue, shelves straightened, anything that's accumulated there gets dealt with. And then the pantry and the maybe gas-powered fridge gets checked properly too. No fridges of doom here. Shelves are wiped, older stock is rotated to the front. Anything spoiled or forgotten gets removed before it becomes a bigger problem. General tidying rounds the day out though. Closets, entryway tables, anything and any spot where clutter tends to collect throughout the week gets addressed. Saturday, which is main cleaning and Sunday prep. So this is the biggest, most physical day of the week and it deserves our full attention. In the cleaning, it is time for a deep clean. That means pulling everything out from under the stove and the icebox or the fridge whenever possible, and actually cleaning underneath and not just around. Walls near the stove get wiped or spot cleaned where, of course, grease has splattered over the week. Table legs and chairs get scrubbed, and not just the tabletop, which, you know, when I used to have chairs that were turned, or I was like, oh my gosh, like cleaning with little kids, but I love the idea of being like, yes, I'm going to do that once a week. So maybe you want to do that. Cabinet fronts get wiped down. In the main living areas, wood furniture often gets a proper polish. So many households will use things like linseed oil or beeswax based polish instead of some kind of commercial spray. And they work it in by hand, which both cleans and conditions the surface. Cushions will get beaten outside the same way that rugs were on Friday, knocking dust free rather than just fluffing them. It's the whack and fluff that tackles both. Windows will get washed inside and sometimes outside, depending on the weather. Baseboards get wiped down, which is a spot that is so easy to skip daily, but suddenly you'll be like, oh my goodness, so make sure you do that. Floors throughout the main area will get washed by hand rather than just swept. A wet cloth worked on hands and knees or with a mop, depending on the household. This pulls up what a broom relocates from one side of the room to the other. Now, I personally have just fallen in love with washing the floor by hand, and it is truly a deep clean that the Amish already knew about. I, however, have purchased knee pads, and that has made it such a game changer. So food for Sunday also gets prepared ahead of time. So nothing heavy needs to happen tomorrow because tomorrow is a special day. The whole house gets a final once over because Saturday's cleaning isn't really about Saturday. It's about arriving at Sunday with nothing left undone. Sunday, rest, worship, and family. So necessary cooking will still happen, like breakfast or whatever, because everybody still needs to eat. Dishes still get washed. Essential animal care still happens because the animals are not observing the day off. But beyond that, work is deliberately and significantly reduced. And not out of guilt where you're just still technically running all of these lists through your head, but really actually just enjoying the day, taking a rest, because Saturday already did that heavy lifting on purpose so that Sunday wouldn't have to, because Sunday is a Sabbath day of rest that many Christians still observe today, not just the Amish. I know Jewish people do theirs on Saturday. Other people don't, but I think it's really nice. Even if you're not religious at all, I think it might just be nice to just have an intentional rest day. A few things are happening underneath all of this, and it's worth naming directly for why this works. One task category per day removes a decision before you've even had to decide it. You're not standing in your kitchen deciding what today's project should be. That was decided long before you woke up and probably long before you were born. That single removed decision repeated daily adds up to a lighter mental load. The same decision fatigue that research shows, it causes a big problem for a lot of us, from grocery shopping to parenting, fixed schedule. It sidesteps that large chunk of it before breakfast is even finished, which is really nice. Also, batching similar tasks also simply is just so much more efficient than switching between task types all day. Every time your brain shifts from laundry brain to kitchen brain to bathroom brain to work brain or whatever, as it turns out, we have lots of departments and there is a cost to that switch, even a small one. Now, you know, I like doing laundry throughout the week, but if you do consider that stacking 5 laundry tasks together, you only pay that cost once. If you scatter them across the week, you are paying it 5 separate times. You do what you want to do. Tell me how you feel about laundry. But Sunday being fully off isn't laziness dressed up as tradition. It is built-in recovery scheduled on purpose every single week, rather than something that you collapse into after running yourself down by Thursday. And I know that the women don't fully have it off, but I'm just saying it's nice to have a lot of it off. I mean, I don't fully have it off, but who really does? Here's how to build your own version, because you might not want 7 categories that mirror this exactly. Here's a modern shape so that you can build a week for yourself. Maybe you want a laundry day. I don't like laundry days, but you might want to. A wash, dry, fold, put away, done, not spread across 3 days. I just like to do 1 a day so it's easier, but whatever. A baking or meal prep day. Now that is something I can get behind, where you batch what you can for the days ahead instead of deciding fresh every single evening at 4 o'clock and being like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna make? A deep clean day for the main living spaces, a day for smaller, less loved rooms, bathrooms, entryways, whatever your house tends to skip. And I'm not saying you need to be spending like all of your days cleaning. I'm just saying like having this planned focus is good, and you can come up with your own routine yourself. And also, a really good one is a genuine rest day that you don't touch, regardless of what state the house is in. And I think that is the most useful habit sitting in this entire list, because a non-negotiable rest day is so good because you have something to look forward to. And this is something I have been doing for a couple of years, because I had gone years without a single break, and now I usually take Saturday off as a sort of like a Sabbath, and I just rest. I do whatever I want, whether it's cooking, baking, reading, whatever. This is just the weekly rhythm. If you want to see how a single day inside the Amish rhythm actually plays out, hour by hour, I have got a video right here on exactly how they did that. You can watch that. I hope something great happens for you today. Please like, subscribe, give us a hype. Stay chatty and mighty. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.